The format for this meeting is a 10-minute speaker, our secretary's announcements, a coffee and snack break, and our main speaker. The first speaker for tonight is Bobbi Joe.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bobbi Joe, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Bobbi Joe. Welcome to all the newcomers. It's really nice to be at a meeting where there's so many new people. So I'm just going to take a deep breath and try to be present this whole time here because speaking is always rough for me. I'm extremely grateful that I'm sober, and probably more so today than ever in all my life. Just because probably this past week, I've had the opportunity to witness what alcohol really does to a person physically. And thanks. If I try to drink, that'll go all over me. But it's okay.
Sorry for the interruption.
Don't worry. I appreciate it. It means I have to speak less. So usually I'm not this distracted, but the fact of the matter is for the past week I've spent almost every day in the hospital because my very best friend in the world has cirrhosis of the liver as a direct result of alcoholism. And 2 years ago, I thought our greatest battle was going to be getting her sober. And, and that's just how it works. That's how the disease works. And I haven't had that kind of reminder for a really long time, but it's super hard. And I feel extremely grateful that I have the opportunity to be present for her every single day because she is my sister. And that's a gift of sobriety. It's a direct result of working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I always think of myself and think I am one of those people that you got to wait. I always think of myself as you got to stay until, what's that stupid saying about stay until the miracle comes? And that's me. Because my journey in sobriety has not been smooth. It's been long, but it's not been smooth. And that's okay. That's the journey I get to go on. The problem with me is I have a really hard time living, just existing in the world. And that's been since I was young. And so for me, when I found alcohol became my solution. And so and my drinking career was it was a 10-year chunk of just, I found the solution and it set me free and it gave me everything I needed because I didn't feel a part of, I felt separate, I felt different, all of those things, and I couldn't function in society, in the world that I grew up in. It was very hard for me. And when I found alcohol, I all of a sudden could exist in the world. And I loved it. I loved everything about it. I also, loved doing other things. But alcohol was my solution. And so I don't think my story's probably any different than anyone else's. Like, I drank in excess. I was a blackout drinker. I did all kinds of crazy things. I'm an alcoholic. And I had a good upbringing. I had good parents. There's just the simple fact that when I put alcohol in my body, I'm allergic to alcohol. I don't stop. There's nothing I can do to stop it. And I tried to manage and control that for a lot of years. I left because I was absolutely convinced that it was here where I grew up that was the problem. And so I went to college and blew through a lot of my parents' money trying to make it out of there. And they weren't too pleased, I'm sure. And I stayed in San Diego after I graduated, and I was convinced, there was a lot of drugs, there was a lot of alcohol, and I hit bottom there. I hit bottom because I just was a blackout drinker. And I tried all the things we do to stop, and I couldn't stop. And I was convinced that if I just moved and I went somewhere else, it would be okay. I just need a fresh start. And I came home, and I tried to live at home, and that lasted like 2 weeks because my parents wanted way too much information about what I was doing and where I was going, and that just wasn't going to be a good situation. And some people here know my parents, so you know. And so anyway, I'm at 5 minutes, and so that's it. Like, my bottom's probably a lot like a lot of people's. I hit bottom. My roommates were going to AA. They said, hey, I didn't, they weren't my roommates. I was couch surfing because I didn't have anywhere to live, and I couldn't live at home, and I didn't have any money. And so that's what I was doing. And they were like, hey, we're going to the Alano Club. And I was like, well, okay, I'll go there. And I'll tell you what, when I arrived at the Hermosa Beach Alano Club, I heard my story. I heard my story loud and clear. And it was the first time I'd ever heard that before. And I decided to stay. They didn't stay. I stayed. And I just jumped into AA the way they have you do at the Alano Club. And I did all that stuff that we all do. And I was abstinent from alcohol for a really long time, which means I just did the whole don't drink no matter what. And that was good enough for me for a whole lot of years, probably till, unfortunately, I was 12 years sober and I hit the wall. And then I decided, well, maybe I will do the steps, like for real. Because, you know, there's all kinds of ways to do the steps. People can argue there aren't, but there are. People have their ideas on it. And what I did worked for me in that moment. But there came a point in time where it didn't work anymore. And so I started to work the steps, and I still got to that part where either God is everything or he is nothing. And I was like, I think I have some power. Like, I think I still have some control. I'm not quite sure God is everything. And so I kind of walked away from AA for a little while, but I stayed sober. And then I came crawling back at 17 because that's where God took me, to my knees. And I did the steps again at a way deeper level with a whole lot of information, but I still didn't know. And at 27 years sober, I sat across from my very best friend in AA. What's that? Some guy just, I don't want to say some guy, a rock star had just died. And he committed, Chester Barrington, right? And you know what? I understood that. Like, at 27 years sober, I was like, I understand not wanting to live anymore. And she was like, oh my God, we need to go to a meeting. And so that's when I started working with Kurt. And I started a spiritual journey, which is something that I did not get along the way for whatever reason. I'm not saying that what I did was wrong, because I stayed sober. But at that point in time, I really needed a spiritual solution. And that's what I got. And when I had an awakening. And as a result of that awakening, God surrendered me. 2 years trying to get, back on track. And then my dad got really sick. And I was present for that. I was present because I had done the 12 steps in Alcoholics Anonymous, because I had had a spiritual awakening, because I have a practice. And so in this short 10 minutes, I'm not even going to get to that, because that's what saves my life on a daily basis. It's what saves my life every day this week when I get up and sit with my friend as she's dying, is my 2 feet are on the ground today. I am present. I do my prayer. I do my meditation in the morning. I do my reading. I show up, and I ask God to show me what to do, how to live, what to say, what not to say. And that has worked with me. And also, like, the big ticket item is, like, all of a sudden I understood the purpose of the 4th step. Like, I'm not even going to have time to talk about that one. But all of a sudden I understood the 4th and 6 and 7 and how I had been driven by self all these years. Like, all these years, even sober, I had been driven by self. And I didn't get that, ever. And then when I finally got it, it was like, this is freedom. This is walking light. This is walking through hard stuff sober and being present for people and healing. And that's what I get to do today. My life has completely transformed. I've been sober a long time. And when you're sober a long time, a lot of things happen in your life, and you have to walk through a lot of things. And I feel like the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous have prepared me with everything I need. I can't live life without it. When I'm disconnected, my defects pop up. And if I'm not connected, I will pick those puppies up and I will run with them. And they will drive me. And they will drive me crazy. It's the same type of drive that drove me to take the first drink before I even drank. It's that same conversation in my head. The only difference now is I have a solution for that conversation. And now I'm aware of it. And I can live in step 10. I can live in step 10, 11, 12, 10 and 11 together. Honestly, right here, right now, what am I thinking? What am I doing? What am I about to do? What am I feeling? That's how I walk through my days every day. It's not always like that. It's not. Some days it's super light and everything's easy. But right now, today, that's how it is. And that's okay. The good news for me is I return to this. I don't think I ever leave. I don't think I leave the solution anymore because it's just way too painful. When I'm not living in the solution, I don't want to live. And I'm really clear on that today. And so, yeah, I know I'm scattered, so sorry. But it's been a really great journey for those of you who are new. Like, whatever it takes. I did whatever people told me to do, and they told me to do some pretty stupid stuff that was not in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I did it, like put on makeup and wear lipstick. I was like, what? But I just did it, right? I went and I spoke, I traveled around, I did all those things, and I stayed sober. I cleaned at the Hermosa Alano Club. You had to wash you used to have to wash ashtrays. It was gross. Ashtrays. I did all that. Why? Because someone told me. Someone told me, pick up the chairs, clean the ashtrays, and that's what I did. And it worked. It worked until I had to take that next spiritual jump. And my only thing is, I hope pay attention, because now the book looks much different for me today. And I can see it was all in there all along. And I don't want to pretend that the people I was working with didn't point it out to me. But there's a whole lot about the spiritual solution in there. And for me, that's what set me free. That's what changed my entire life. And I was not a nice person to be around. Also, I'll just toss in there that I did have the opportunity to make amends to my parents when I was very young in sobriety. And that's probably the greatest gift that I was given. The greatest gift was being able to make amends to my parents and to be present for my dad when he was dying, and walk through that horrendous journey. And I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. And I'm well aware that not everybody gets that opportunity. So I just always say lean in and trust, because the greatest growth for me has been when I am in the most amount of pain. And so now when I enter a period of pain, which is where I am right now, I'm not going to lie, when I'm sitting there, I know God's there. And I know that's exactly where I'm supposed to be, sitting there with God, because God's the solution. And so all my little ideas about how things should be or what's going on or whatever, they don't matter, right? Because I don't know anything. And I've never been more clear about that than today. And I just hope that I remain here because, it's a gift. That's it. Is that 10 minutes? Yeah. You weren't going to tell me that. Were you going to tell me it was 10 minutes?
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Now our main speaker will share his experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join me in welcoming Kurt from Redondo Beach.
Alan Rosen, alcoholic. Uh-huh. Okay, here we go. Molly asked me, "Are you nervous?" I said, "No, not at all." What I like to say here is I've been around here since February 1979. That's when I first came into AA. And I was 22 years old. And I thought I had it going on. The courts didn't think that, but I did. And one of the things I like to start with is, and I want you to hear this because it was really important. Thank God that I'm not suffering from what's not happening anymore. See, I was driven sober for 19 years by things that weren't happening. That was a sober condition. Now, what does that mean? It means that I was a victim of a narrative in my head that talked to me as me, and it was all based on the past or the future or the conditioning or belief systems, old ideas, guilt, remorse, self-pity. That was the paradigm I lived in. And when you live in that paradigm, what Bobby Joe talked about, presence, you can't be here. You're not here. The other thing I like to say, I'd like to thank my caregiver. No, I'm just kidding. So we were talking earlier, this last year has been, 11 months. I snapped an Achilles heel. They fixed it. My body rejected all the stitches. Went in to clean it out. I got a bacteria in the hospital. Was on a PICC line 20 weeks. And then fell on my scooter because I was getting kind of cocky on those little scooters. Fractured 3 vertebrae in my back. What else? There's a bunch of other stuff. Lost a tooth. I took my teeth out before I was going to speak because I can't speak with this retainer, right? So it's been a fun 11 months, let's just say. I'm a successful failure here. I think failure is part of this deal. And I don't mean it in the sense of failure success. I mean it in the sense of the Buddhists would say, no mud, no lotus. That's how they'd say it. So I got here in 1979. How that came about was I was drinking in a bar that I drank in every day with guys that were my age now. And when they closed the bar, I went down and bought a 6-pack at the liquor store, and there was a Persian guy behind the counter, because this was 1979. Don't you remember Iran had a bunch of hostages of ours? And he told me I couldn't read the magazine I was reading without buying it. And something snapped in me. I threw him up on the counter, stuck a knife in his back, stole $63. And I went next door to Steak and Eggs and watched the police interview. And eventually got arrested for it. And which wasn't the first time. I'd been arrested, let's just say double digit, for all kind of things. And they thought I had a drinking problem. And the court stipulated me to, some of you guys know PDAP. That was an offshoot of AA. It was two guys that started a program. And so I learned how to shoot dope in PDAP. And I came around to AA, and here's what I was up against. And I didn't know I was up against this. In fact, 25 years in, I didn't know what I was up against, really. I thought when I came to AA, and you guys told me what the solution was, you probably told me something else, but I heard this. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to white knuckle it for the rest of your life, and that's how you're going to stay sober. And I thought, that's impossible. I can't do that. Now, I didn't know that the condition that I suffered from, part of that condition was that I couldn't white knuckle it. I couldn't stay sober. I couldn't stop the start, see? Willpower, reason, guilt, remorse, self-pity, prison, didn't stop the start because I was driven. Bobby Joe talked about it. I was driven by this condition that we talk about here. It's called the bondage of self. It's a sober condition. It's masked when you're drinking because, like she said, my solution to that was, well, let me show you what it looked like. It's really easy. So let's just pretend this is Grey Goose on the rocks. Okay, I can do this now. See? That was my solution. Because I couldn't do this reality sober. I couldn't do it. And I knew that long before I drank. I knew that when I went into 7th grade homeroom, and I was 5 minutes late, and the narrative in my head was this. Well, if you go in now, everybody's going to be looking at you. So what was the solution to that? Don't go to homeroom. See? This is self-centeredness. I'm centered on this narrative. And that's kind of how I lived my life. And that was normal. It's what I knew. That's all I knew. I didn't quit drinking here. I got released from the obsession to drink. There's a big difference. I drank it 19 years after being here, and I worked all those steps. And what I'm here to tell you, after being here 13 more years sober, is the menu is not the meal. I lived on the menu for a long time, and the nourishment never relieved me of the condition of self. It never relieved me of the narrative in my head. It never relieved me of the fear, never relieved me of the mental anxiety. We say fear here. Let me get into this, because I was talking about this morning in a meeting. It's so terrible. This lady, I spoke at a meeting in New York, and this lady, this doesn't happen very often, but she said, hey, I heard you share before. I really didn't like you. She goes, but what you did is you challenged my belief systems. And she said, I listened to you tonight, and I really enjoyed the talk. And I thought, that's what we do here, see? From the very beginning, my belief systems were challenged. My belief systems are in my head. They're mental, they're thoughts. The only reason I'm trying to believe something is because I don't believe it. That's why I'm trying to believe it. See, I needed to know this thing experientially. This needed to be, our big book says, it's as much a fact as we are. It's as much a fact as we are. This great reality that lives within. So, back to fear. So what I suffered from wasn't fear here. I suffered from mental anxiety produced by a narrative in my head that talked to me based on the past or future conditions, false evidence appearing real. You might call it psychological fear. Real fear, fight or flight, takes no intellectual discourse whatsoever. If I walk out in front of a bus and I don't see it coming, he honks his horn, I jump out of the way. If I got to wait for my mind to kick in, I'm a dead man. That's fear. So when I'm talking about fear, I'm not talking about fear, I'm talking about mental anxiety. So I used to shower with 15 people every morning, and nobody was in the shower with me. I would have a narrative going off about the supply house, how they didn't get my order right, or they're out of these parts or whatever. And the next customer I was going to go to, she doesn't like me smoking before I go. You know, it was just ongoing chatter. You know, we say the committee around here. So what happened? Like, what happened in 19 years? So I think Chuck C. in his book, New Pair of Glasses, says it best. He said the most baffling characteristic of alcoholism, both to the alcoholic and those who must deal with him, that'd be Linda, is the conflicts of sober reality. Sober reality. And I drank to preserve my sanity. That's what happened. When I drank, I got some ease and comfort that I didn't have sober. I was crossing the T's, dotting the I's. I was doing all the menu. And then eventually, you know, how this thing happens is it's kind of gradual. It wasn't like one thing that sent me out, right? It was a gradual. You know, I got busy at work. You know, I got a little angry with supply house, and no big deal. With my former wife, I got a little angry with her, no big deal. Everything's no big deal, right? Until it's a big deal. All these things block me from a sense of gratitude, a sense of reverence for sobriety, a sense of reverence for you, a sense of reverence for myself. It blocked me from that. And so when I drank, it was real simple. I hadn't thought about drinking in 19 years. I went up to a guy's house. I was in the backyard with him. And there was a glass of beer on the table, and it had a little white foam on the top of it. And I looked at it and said, I think I'll have one of those. It was just like that. Hadn't thought about drinking in 19 years. So he looked at me and he said, are you sure? And I said, yeah. So I drank that. And what happened was my head kicked in and said, I think I'll have another one. So I drank that one. I drank 4 glasses of beer. I got in my truck. I drove down the hill from Palos Verdes. And I had this little voice that said, well, that wasn't so bad. And within a month, I was drinking a quart of vodka a day. Within a month. It was like I never stopped drinking. And I'll tell you, I caused more problems drinking after 19 years than I ever did before. I didn't get arrested, thank God. But I couldn't get released. There's a lot of guys that saw me when I came back 13 years ago. They're here. I mean, and I knew what to do. I knew what the menu was. I knew all the instructions I was supposed to do. I knew exactly what to do. And I'd do them. But then I'd go home and I'd drink. I could not get released from that. So Ted J. was the guy that started this kind of thing for me. Ted was a little guy, about 118 pounds. He rode a Gold Wing. And he was in the meeting up there, and I was complaining about how my wife had screwed everything up by leaving, you know. Don't you know it was her fault, you know? I didn't, you know, you kind of forget about, you know, 250, 150s and all the, you know, police in the backyard and getting tied to an avocado tree, you know, that kind of stuff. Minor things. And I walked out to my plumbing truck, and Ted Jenkins followed me out. And I didn't know Ted at the time, but Ted was a real quiet guy. He had a little twinkle in his eye. I didn't say much. And what Ted said to me was, can I make a suggestion? And I was like, I had that cocky kind of attitude, like, sure, just, I wanted him to give me the suggestion so I could go home and drink, get done with it. And he said, I noticed you raise your hand as a newcomer. And I thought, what an idiot. Well, I was drinking this morning. He said, I know that, you're alcoholic. Then he said this, every time you raise your hand as a newcomer, you put more guilt, remorse on the condition you're trying to extinguish. He said, stop it, you're not a newcomer. He said, we did not design that for this. Everybody knows you up here. And then he turned around and walked away from me. He's just standing there. But what that did was, there was a resonance of truth that was being spoken that I hadn't heard in a long time. And I went home and drank, just like I normally would. A couple weeks later, I went to the meeting, was complaining about my wife again, how she screwed everything up, right? Walked out of the meeting, guess who followed me out? Ted. And he said, can I make another suggestion? I'm like, oh. Now, the only reason I listened to him is because the first time he said that, I knew that this guy knew something I didn't know. And my head was telling me, well, you should know that because you've been in AA for 19 years, And he said, if I write a prayer for you, will you say it? And the prayer is for your wife. And I said, excuse my language, yeah, I'll say it. Good. The bitch needs to change. I mean, our perception's a little twisted, right? So the prayer he wrote was, God, please give Rhonda the very best that life has to offer. Please give her health, happiness, and prosperity. And please give her a peace and understanding she's never experienced before. That was a prayer. And I said it every day. And some nights I gritted my teeth saying it. Some nights I didn't want to say it. And about 3 months later, keep it short, that prayer happened to me. That's what happened. It happened to me in my house. And what the effects of that prayer did was it gave me clarity to see what was going on for the last 19 years. And what was going on for the last 19 years is I was managing my life with spiritual principles. That's what I told my sponsor, Don. He said, that's not what was happening. He said, what you were doing is you were managing your life with your ego's interpretation of spiritual principles. He said, there's a big difference. He said, spiritual principles have to be embodied, lived. And that was about 13 years ago. So what I know today is, there are parts of the book, Bobby Joe said, they're in there, but I didn't see them. One of them was, it's in We Agnostics. It says, without knowing it, this is the key, without knowing it. Just remember this part. I've been brought here by a certain kind of faith. See, I had faith. I didn't think I had faith because I was trying to connect it to church, God, old ideas. I had faith in the God of reason, this narrative that was going on in my head. That's what I listened to. I depended on it. All along, I had faith. It was just what I had faith in. And I never saw that. I probably read that book I don't know how many times. Never saw it. The other part of the book I didn't see was, in the third step, it says, being convinced that self manifested in various ways is what defeated us. So we're the us. Self is singular. It's not a thing, it's a narrative that manifests through a thought process in my head. This condition, this bondage of self. It's based on conditioning, belief systems, old ideas, guilt, remorse, self-pity. And that's what ran my life. Sober, in AA, here. There was no sense of freedom. I mean, there was no sense of any of the promises. How could there be? I'm listening to a narrative in my head that's talking to me as me, and I think it's me. It says there, it says in our book, it says, our actor is self-centered. You know what the good news is? You're not the friggin' actor. That's the condition. You're not the condition. I'm not the condition. None of us are. That's what I needed to be relieved of. I didn't even know I suffered from it. So this put a whole different spin on it. And that was the gift of drinking at 19 years. That was a tremendous gift. So when I say failure is part of this thing, I mean, let's take it out of the context of failure. Let's put it in the context of, I like to use, it was like letting all the air out of the balloon. When I first got here, the balloon was full, 79. A little bit came out. 86, half of it came out. 13 years ago, all of it came out. And what I saw was, I called Don before, Don Coyes. I asked him to sponsor me. He still hasn't answered me. It's been 13 years. I called him before. We have this little thing we do back and forth. I said, I'm going to speak at a meeting. I need you to burn some sage for me. Last time he called me, he said, there's 3,000 people here. I need you to burn some sage for me. And I'll, if you want to know what that's about, I'll tell you after the meeting. But I called him. I said, hey, we're going to speak at a meeting. And Linda goes, hey, Don. And he goes, Kurt, you can hang up now. I mean, it's just like you said, have fun, right? This is very serious, but we do have fun here. But usually when I get up and I want to talk about this thing, I really want to talk about the condition that drove me sober. Because I know a lot of people that suffer in long-term sobriety based on a mental condition that keeps them in fear, mental anxiety, and there's actions out of that that cause tremendous problems for other people and themselves. And the reason I know that's because I did it. And the message I want to say is, there's more here than that. There's freedom from that here. It says it in our book. Miss this too. What we really have, emphasis on really, is a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. My spiritual condition does not need to be maintained. That's what makes it spirit. There's nothing wrong with it, never has been. What I have is a mental condition that tells me I'm spiritually sick. That's what I have. And that's what I worked on when I worked on inventory. It's what I work on when I'm doing what the 10-step says. Continue to watch, right? For selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Well, these are manifestations of self. It doesn't say continue to listen. See, I was always listening, not watching it. I was not separate from it. I was always listening to it. It was driving me. What we really have is a daily reprieve. That's what we really have. Now, we get a lot of years. A lot of us get a lot of years based on those days. We string them together. That was my experience. I mean, I've been sober way more than half my life. Now, the problem is it hadn't been in a row. It was 19 years, 4 years, now 13 years. But I grew up here. This is where I grew up. I learned about life here. I learned about I learned about some of you guys. I didn't want to know about you guys. Some of you guys. I mean, some of the journeys here are, we, like Bobby Joe said, if you're here long enough, you'll go through life experiences. I had the same opportunity to sit with my dad. It was a good death. I was the only one. My brother called me. He said, "You got to come to Houston. We can't do this. You can do it." I got to sit with him for a month before he died and be there for him. It was a good death. He had a full life. A couple of my brothers couldn't deal with it. This shouldn't be happening. I learned that here. I learned this is the cycle of life, right? There's a medicine man in a book, Linda's reading it right now. He said there are many kinds of death besides physical death. When you allow a part of yourself to die that doesn't serve you any longer, you can be reborn into a new and better way of living. See, he's talking about it based on a principle, not on a physical act. So these were kind of some of the things. I wasn't taught to think this way. See, I was taught to cross the T's, dot the I's, make an A in AA. That's how I approached this thing. And it worked because it didn't work. It worked. It brought me to a point where this had to be an integrated way of living. Koya said to me when we first started doing this, he said, "Look, here's how this thing is." He said, "There are principles, laws, and values in the world of the Spirit, and all of this is the world of the Spirit." And he said, "They are all in perfect harmony." And he said, "You're out of harmony with those laws and values." And he said, "The 12 steps are 12 gentle ways," and I'll disagree with him on the gentle, "to bring you back into harmony with this principles, laws, and values. And then on a daily basis to maintain that, be able to move in the world freely without this head thinking." I mean, it's not my thinking, because you got it. It's thinking. It's not my thinking. It's thinking. And once I saw that I wasn't my thinking, then something else opened. So this whole thing has been a process of discovery. It's also been very stage specific. Sobriety is very stage specific. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, when I came in here, I thought alcohol was a problem. I mean, it got me 7 years in the penitentiary. It's obvious it's the problem. I got cars repossessed, DWIs, public intoxication arrest. I could go on, but there's no need to. I thought it was the problem. And what it was, see, it was causing problems, but it wasn't the problem. And then when I was here just a little bit, I realized, wait, this ain't the problem. This is a solution to the problem. So it started to change. That's what I mean by stage specific. I remember Don Pritz said something to me one time. He said, "Listen, I want you to know something, Kurt. I want you to know you're very special. You're just not extra special." Went right over my head. I mean, I didn't get what he was saying. He'd say stuff like, "If I rob you from your pain, you got to start over again from the very beginning. If I rob you from your pain, that doesn't mean I can't be there with you in your pain. It just means circumstances. God uses what's available." Another thing he used to say. For me, what was available was the penitentiary. For somebody else, that's not the drama of life. It might be a divorce. It might be losing a job. It might be. There was a lot of those things for me because I'm a knucklehead. You know, I don't pay attention. And so I do what the book says. And I do it, on my own. I do it by myself. I go to the beach every morning. I sit on the wall. Danny sees me sometimes down there. And I do the deal, you know. I ask for my thinking to be directed. Why? Because the main problem in the alcoholic center is in his mind. That's what it says. My thinking needs to be directed. I don't wake up in the morning with the vultures on the headboard anymore. I don't wake up going, what's going to happen today, in a panicked mode. I wake up in a mode that says, what's going to happen today? Oh my God. Do you know how sacred this is? That we're consciously aware of the fact that our lives have been saved and we're here right now, here. That has a reverence to it. And doing this on a daily basis keeps me in touch with that. It says, before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, divorce it from self-pity, dishonest and self-seeking motives. So let me just explain what that is for me. Self-pity is the past. Dishonest is, when I'm looking through an ego lens, I don't see with clarity. I can't see truthfully. I can't see honestly. And self-seeking is the future. Now, when I ask for that, the effect is my thought life is placed on a higher plane. It's just exactly what the book said. And I'm consciously aware of the fact that thy will is being done. Right here, right now. It's not something that needs to happen. It's a happening. And what that's allowed is me to move in the world without a reactive state. Koyas told me this. He gave me this exercise. And the exercise was, every time you're agitated or doubtful, I want you to pause. I said, well, that's pretty easy. 2 things, I can look for those. The whole week, I'm not getting a damn thing done. So I called him, I said, I failed the test. And he goes, what are you talking about? What test? I said, the test you gave me. He said, what was the test? I said, you told me to pause when agitated or doubtful. He said, you dummy, that wasn't a test. He said, the point of that was to see how much you're driven, to see how much you're not here. See, and when I really started doing this, practicing, integrating this, what it allowed was, when I'd pause, we used to say, thanks for sharing, next. You'd hear that mental narrative. Thanks for sharing, next. When I would pause, what happened eventually was, it created a space. And in that space, something else could come in besides the mental narrative. So it became very responsive rather than reactive. Reactive is just being triggered. Responsive is, our book talks about it, you intuitively know how to handle situations used to baffle you. So it's a very different energy. Because all this is an energy. So it was little things like this. This was like, this is how I started to integrate these principles in my life. And everything changed. Everything. Everything. Externally and internally. Now, making amends and doing all that stuff, getting things back in harmony, that was, that's a little wobbly because you're going back to people that really don't want to see you. Which is perfectly fine. One of the experiences I had with Rhonda, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying this, is I said I want to make amends, and she came over to the house. And she's sober 37, 38 years. I said, I need to make amends. She said, stop. I said, what's the matter? She said, I'm afraid if you start talking about this, you're going to experience guilt and remorse. You're going to drink again. I got it. I got it. I said, can I ask you a question? She said, yeah. I said, listen, when you think that I'm ready to discuss this with you and when you're ready to hear that, I said, will you let me know? She said, I will. I walked away from that house free. And that process has been a process with her. Linda and I got invited to Grandma's. They have a ranch up in Pine Mountain, and I wasn't welcome there because before Ray died, the kid's grandfather, he said, you're not welcome here. And I didn't know that because he was mumbling, the last day before he died. And I thought he was telling me to get out of the way so the kids could say goodbye to him. Well, that's not what he was saying. He was telling me, get out of here. You're not welcome here. So how I found that out was making amends to Grandma. Grandma said, I can't invite you back to the ranch because that was his last wish, that you're not welcome here. So 13 years later, my son comes over to the house and said, Grandma wants to invite you up to the ranch to the barbecue. So I knew it'd come full circle. And Linda and I went up there, and the whole family was there. See, I was the one always missing. See, people heal at a different pace. We need to allow people to heal at their pace. It's a process, not an event. You're going to have huge events in this process, revelatory events. But they're involved in a process, and the process is sobriety. The process is, we talk about emotional sobriety. The way Koyas does a thing with the 12 steps in the medicine wheel, where he puts it in a circle because his tradition is native. So in the medicine wheel, there's 4 sections in a medicine wheel. He puts the first 3 steps, next 3 steps, next 3 steps, next 3 steps. First 3 steps, your relationship with God. Next 3 steps, your relationship with yourself. Next 3 steps, your relationship with others. And the last 3 steps are the elder's wisdom. You wake up. You enter the world of the Spirit. You can comprehend the word serenity. You know peace. You can look the world in the eye. That existential crisis of unworthiness will disappear. That's the gift. So, Mr. Zimmerman, I'm glad you asked me to speak tonight. And I think that's all I got. Thanks.
Give it up one more time for Mr.